Hello, and welcome to It's Already In You podcast. We are your hosts, Liz
and Janine, nutrition and movement experts, mothers and business owners, obsessed with helping you quiet the noise of diet culture.
Seeing through the false advertising and promises of our food and fitness industries, helping you discover that everything you need to upgrade your health and well-being is already in you. Hey everyone, Janine and Liz. We are here with what is becoming a popular segment, Our Bottom Line. And so just a reminder that these are really focused on education in a understandable way, things that you can take with you, maybe to make some different decisions, better decisions, however you want to think about it for your well-being, your health, your life, your family's life. And so today we're going to discuss organic foods. And obviously you've all heard organic, eat organic, don't eat dirty dozen, whatever it may be. We've seen the labels. We've seen probably multiple types of wording. So we really want to break down what really is organic. What do you want to look for? What is the difference between like words like natural and, organic ingredients versus, seeing labels and what does that really mean? And then come to the bottom line of what is, in our opinion, really important to prioritize in terms of organic foods and what ones kind of take the top of the list. So, yes. Janine, tell our listeners, when you hear the word organic in 2025, what does it mean to you? Where did it come from? Why is it here? Why do organic even a topic?
Is it 2025?
Is it? Yes, it is. I said that and I was like, is it? I feel like maybe that's the first time I've said it out loud. 2025.
It is 2025. I think I've been writing 24 still.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Here we are.
I just had a moment. I'm just realizing where we are in time, I guess. So when I hear organic, what do I feel?
Yeah.
So it's interesting. So obviously I think of all the things that it doesn't have, right?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have pesticides and herbicides, or it doesn't have the ones that conventional foods have. It doesn't have livestock runoff. It doesn't have hormones and antibiotics and nothing artificial. And the USDA organic label is pretty strict and has remained strict, which is the one thing I feel like we sort of can count on. But when you ask that, I think back like years ago when I would do my seminars, people would say, well, I read a study that there's no nutritional difference, between organic and conventional foods. And I always thought that was a funny thing to hear, because that's not why I would choose organic.
Yeah.
Right? That's not why you choose organic food, because you're concerned with the nutrients being higher. However, that statement was untrue, right? Which we'll get to. But so my concern and my reasoning behind choosing organic is always because of what I don't want in my food.
Sure.
And that is the chemicals and the hormones and the antibiotics and all the stuff that shouldn't be in food. I think that organic's been laden with the adjective that food, and unfortunately, I feel like, and I've asked people this, if an organic tomato was called a tomato, you would not think twice about it, right? And the conventional tomato was called, this is a tomato that has ethyl alcohol injected into it to make it look red and sprayed with pesticides, fungicides, and has glyphosate because it's genetically modified, and all of the things. You would never want to buy that tomato.
Sure.
So the wording that we use plays a big role.
Yeah.
However, organic is, I don't think it's new anymore, but for our society, I would say it's still something that people are not accustomed to hearing when it's associated with food. So you have all of these old school mindsets that think, I don't want organic.
Yeah.
Just give me the regular food. So I think that there's a big problem with the ladening of it with an adjective.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, when you think about organic, and I think really in these last, I don't know, maybe since the 90s or so, it has become a little bit more mainstream. With that being said, I still think that a lot of people are like, organic is bougie. Organic is like, you're carrying your bag and driving this car and having earthy crunchy. But really what organic has become is what it always was, if that makes sense. Like many years ago, 70s, 60s, 50s, before the industrial age, before like fast food and all of that stuff, processed food started to become really dominant. Organic is just the way people ate. It was just the way farmers farmed. And so it's nothing new. In fact, organic eating
what your
and farming and all that stuff has been since the beginning of the time. What has changed is the introduction of all of the other foods and the processing of foods and the farming of foods and all of that stuff. So really, that's the new introduction.
Right.
The organic is the most tried and tested, but for some reason, it still kind of takes this like weird perception of, do I really need it? Does it really make an impact? What really is this about? Is it just spending more money?
Yeah.
When in fact, this is the most like the truest, most proven way to eat as close to what your body needs and as nature can provide. And I think, when we think of it like that, then it's like, the maybe hesitation of, is it really worth the money, can kind of be like, well, no, this has always been there. I can remember when I met my husband in college, and I was a vegetarian, and I was already, this is like, 20 plus years ago, I was already very mindful of the foods I was putting into my body and was choosing organic foods. And I can remember him saying, Liz, stop eating organic, because he thought I was choosing diet. Like he thought organic meant you are eating, like looking for diet-based foods. He's like, you don't need to like be on a diet. Like he had no idea. Like he grew up in a very like vegetables from a can, a lot of starches, like salad was even like foreign to him. And so to see that and then organic, he was just like, this is like a diet culture. And I was like, what? Like, and I talked to him and, we had a conversation, but it was really eye-opening because I feel like he really believed that it was like a trendy or a diet thing, not just eating in its truest form.
Right. Well, it's hard. And it's hard to like visualize or understand. Like I know we've talked about this before and on previous episodes, but when I first started to like really be concerned about how my food was grown and where it was coming from, and my sister-in-law was like, lived in Seattle, then she moved to Vermont. Like we thought that she was earthy crunchy a little bit.
Yeah.
But she, she would look in our refrigerator and be like, Brian, you eat so many eggs a day. Like, you really want to make sure that they're pasture raised and free range. And she would use all those words, and she'd leave and we'd be like, ew.
Yeah.
That's so gross.
Yeah.
And it's funny, like now that I look back at it, or even through the years when I would try to explain to people about, food and how it's grown, and I would have to like remember how I felt hearing something that I've never heard before. Like, some people think that's gross. Like you let the chickens run around, ew, know, like instead of thinking about how they should be in nature.
Yeah.
And basically that's what organic food is, how it should be in nature. Like there's so many things that like a real farmer that has, and I'm sorry, I don't want to offend farmers because I know that they've been manipulated and they do what they have to do to grow their crops. And I am very respectful of their profession because it is tough, right? But if you look at somebody who has had a farm that is intentionally being nurtured by the way that nature and the cycles of the way that life is supposed to work, they can tell you that the bees come to the flower so that they can pollinate, and like they know what's going on. You don't need to spray a chemical in order to avoid bugs.
Yeah.
You can have certain things living in your soil that will avoid those bugs, right? So it's like, if you really knew how everything worked and thought about it, it's fascinating.
It is, yeah.
It's so fascinating.
Yeah.
So, but it is hard to like hear something new and think and not think like, oh, ew.
Yeah, or is it just trendy or whatever? And when I lived in Europe, I wonder if your daughter who's in Italy right now is experiencing this. Like I can remember looking for like organic and there really wasn't organic labels.
Organic.
Like it was just how it is.
It's
it came from
food.
the earth.
Yeah.
So to like kind of step back a little bit, and you mentioned a few things, but organic food is basically, to me, I think of it as real food before chemical foods came. It's just the same as it's always been. It's just, it is what it is. So what are some things that the viewer can hear in kind of like an order that organic food does not have? So no artificial dyes. You can go.
Yeah, no hormones.
Yep.
No antibiotics. No pesticides, herbicides.
Yep.
To a certain degree, there are some organic approved fertilizers that they do use. But I don't want to mislead anybody to say that there's zero.
Yeah.
We would like it if there's zero. And if you get a local organic farmer, you may experience that. But for the most part, I think with the majority of like our big agricultural farming practices, there are still some things being used, but they're approved by USDA Organic. So I feel like they are definitely a less risk than the conventional foods.
Sure.
No livestock runoffs. There's no, so if you could think how disgusting that is.
Yes, yeah.
There's none of that in organic farming. There's no GMOs.
No GMOs, yeah.
Which is a big one.
Yeah. Hydrogenated oils, artificial flavoring, artificial sweeteners, like all of those things.
Yeah, so speaking to packaged stuff, you're then going to make a bigger list, right?
A bigger list, yeah.
If we're speaking just to organic food, whole foods.
Yes, produce.
Then, yeah, what we've said is when you go into the processed foods, to be labeled organic, it has to be 99%?
95%, I think.
95%?
Yes, with a USDA seal.
Organic ingredients.
Yep.
So, and if you see an organic label in front, it's different than in the processed food world than if you see organic ingredients in the back. Mm-hmm. So if something is labeled organic, that is going to be all of the lists that we just said with nothing artificial, no GMOs. But if they're just advertising there are organic ingredients, then the ingredients don't have to comply with the USDA organic rules and regulations.
When I was like looking to get like specifics, it said if it's less than 70% organic, they have to list them as ingredients.
Yeah.
And if you see made with organic, it must be at least 70%. So I guess 95% would be organic completely. You're going to see it at the front. Made with organic has to at least be 70%. And then if they just have organic ingredients, it's less than 70. So remember that, you guys. Like, you know, advertising and marketing and all of that stuff is pretty smart. I mean, they can throw, you know, organic wheat in there and then have everything else be crappy, and still say the word organic somewhere on the label.
Yeah.
So I think that that's powerful to understand labeling, and it's daunting. I get it, because like you can look and you can see GMO and gluten-free and organic and, you know, all these things, natural in this, and there is some manipulation in that, and then there's some truth in that. So I always look, like you said, for the front label, USAID organic, 95%, knowing that is the closest thing that I'm going to get.
Yeah. And it's the same thing. I think that it's important too to bring up, like you said, marketing and advertising. I see a lot of like restaurants, even chains, like there's these big, beautiful salads, or they have one organic item on the menu, right? Mm-hmm. And just remember that, like, just because a restaurant decides to bring on one organic item, they use organic romaine lettuce in their Caesar salad, right? It doesn't mean that everything in that dish is going to be organic. So, you just have to, again, like we're always telling you, be your own advocate and know that organic is a word now that's being thrown around to get people that are concerned with what they're putting in their bodies, what they're putting in their families' bodies. That's now becoming a marketing tool for restaurants and food companies. And so you have to be careful, because the smarter we get, even more intelligent the marketing and the media become with the way that they're trying to reach.
Yeah, definitely. And I like how you said, not being overly concerned about all the nutrients that we're getting from organic. Obviously, that's going to come, and there's a point there. That's a valid thing to think about, but to think more what you're not getting when you choose organic. So, like when you think of organic milk or meat or whatever, like let's just say 50 years ago, what you're getting now when you get those things that are non-organic. Yeah. 50 years ago, it was just milk. You just go and buy milk.
No, it wasn't even pasteurized.
It wasn't even, but it still had all the things in it that were just straight from the cow, and the cows were just doing their thing. And so now when you buy just milk, you're getting, hormones or GMOs or other things that are being added into your body. And so that seal of organic is saying basically, no, we're not going to allow these, or the majority of these, damaging and impactful bad things into your body. And that's kind of I think more of an empowering, and not that you want to scare yourself way, but like, I am choosing this because I don't want to have these things circulating in my body.
Right. And do you notice that the ads for like a lot of these companies that make dairy that's not organic, and their ads are becoming more like natural and farms and cows roaming around.
Yes.
It's like two of them.
Yes.
And they look so like, beautiful and serene, and it just feels right? Yeah. Like this is the way that your food should be grown, and this is what we do. Yeah. But that is the reason why you're seeing that. Like you're seeing these pictures of nature and on food advertisements, and you'll see a lot of green now, like a lot of plants, and with anything that they're trying to get you to think is a more natural, more organic type of food. And it's sad, because I think that a lot of us, it's hard to not see that, right? Yeah. Like to unsee that is difficult. You see it and you think, oh, look that's nice. That's the way it's supposed to be. And you can't assume, because they're using that marketing to manipulate you.
Totally. Yeah. And like thinking, a lot of what we are buying into when we're buying non-organic food is more of an industry. It's like a hamster on a really fast wheel. Like they're just trying to produce more and more and more. So like things like you said in the beginning, where you might see in more local farming or smaller farms, like crop cycling. When you're doing that and your farm has multiple crops and waves, like each one plays on each other. But if you're and encourages, and the insects come and all of that stuff. But if you are trying to make money and mass produce, you're not going to see that. You're going to see a dairy farm. You're going to see a cow farm. You're going to see a corn. And that's what that farmer is going to just try to turn out as much as possible. And nature's not going to allow that on its own, because it's not working with nature. So then they're going to have to come in and add things to make something happen that's not natural. Right. And so when you think about that process and you're looking more like locally, it can be like, oh, this is how it's, and then the birds come. And I mean, even now, like walking outside today and you feel spring, and you can just feel how like Mother Nature's starting to like do its thing. And then something next is going to happen.
Even fertilizer, if you think about it, like we didn't make fertilizer. Fertilizer was done by the other components of the farm. Yeah. Right? Like what other species were living on the farm. Like that's the way that it was that it worked. Now we've had to add this,
Yeah.
this different component into our farming practices, which is just another thing that our bodies are not accustomed to this.
Yeah.
Past these 100 years or less that we've been using things outside of what was normal for farming practices. So, and now our soil integrity is suffering because of that, which in turn, the nutrients and the antioxidants and the oxygen in the soil are all suffering for that. So if you look at the studies that are out, and I can briefly speak to those if you'd like, but we are definitely seeing a pretty big decrease or difference in nutrients in conventional food versus organic. Like 18 to 69% is what the studies are showing.
And it makes perfect sense, why you would.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're depleted. They're not abundant from the beginning. And then each step of that process takes away a little bit more nutrition, whether it's spraying the wax so that it can go on the truck and go across the country and sit on the shelf. So knowing too, and you might be able to speak to this a little bit differently than me, but when I often will tell people going to your farmer's market and stuff like that, like getting local produce and dairy and all of that stuff, meats, if possible, like that often is your truest or most abundant form of nutrients, as well as really honoring the cycle of the environment. And I've had people be like, well, I don't see the organic label. How does that mean? Are you sure that it's organic? And obviously, you need to talk to the farmer and ask some practices, or putting an organic label on a packaging or on a sign or whatever, that costs money too. Yeah. So a lot of these independent small farmers, if you simply just talk to them and you ask when you're at the Wakefield Farmers Market or Melrose or whatever, what are their practices? They might not have that label on it, but their practices are probably pretty true to integrity.
You would hope.
You would hope if it's local.
I do feel like the farmers markets are becoming a place to sell things, and you still have to be your own advocate there. Mm-hmm. Like you said, and really important to double click on it. It is local. It's not traveling. It's going to have the most nutrients. It's going to be the freshest, absolutely. And you're supporting local, which is another positive in society as a whole. But as farmers markets get more popular, unfortunately, in our society, they become a place for, the just local businesses to now get involved and showcase. Sure. And if they pay for a table, then they're allowed to be there. And, sometimes I'll get really frustrated at a farmer's market because I'll see a bread that's manufactured, for Shaw's or for a certain or for supermarkets in general. And I know that it's not, it shouldn't be at a farmer's market. Sure. It's not being,
But then you see your friend Kim Gregory in Pure Pastry and you're like,
and then you see that and you're excited. Yes. But you do have to question, and you still do, if something comes in a package just because it's at a farmer's market doesn't mean it's okay. And sometimes I get upset because if you go to a farmer's market and they're selling red number 40 ice cream, to me that's an issue, right? It's a conflict, and you're taking away the integrity of what a farmer's market should mean, right? If they're making snow cones with blueberries and maple syrup from the farms that are next to them, 100% I'm on board with that. And I think that's a wonderful way to show people that you can have treats and foods that are fun to give your family that are still wholesome and good, and that we could grow, 10 miles, 100 miles away.
Yeah.
But I do feel like it's important to always keeping your eyes open and knowing, again, we just like the label organic, or just saying organic, or just saying this is natural, which we should obviously speak to, or just saying it, this was at the farmer's market, right? Mm-hmm. People have brought me stuff and, you're going to love this. It's from the farmer's market. And it's
yes, you're okay. But that's just the gap in education too. Yes. That's probably that person actually really trying to think I'm used to shopping at Market Basket. I'm taking the time and energy to go to a farmer's market. I'm going to trust that the stuff there. And so again, it's that layer of empowerment of just like following through, finishing the sentence, whatever, however you want to think about it. That I think we all have to just keep reminding ourselves, because there's a strong force trying to like infiltrate.
Yeah.
I feel like a kind of crazy person.
And sometimes, like, and I'm going to say this, and it's going to be a funny thing for me to say, because I feel like I am definitely further on that spectrum of what I will, choose to put in my body, and what I feel that people need to get. It really, like, it makes me concerned that, like, we live in a society where people sometimes are more concerned with what they're putting in their car for gas, what they're feeding their animals, versus what they are taking in themselves. And sometimes, yes, it's ignorance and it's lack of education, or it's just trusting the fact that, why would it be for sale if it wasn't, perfectly safe and healthy for us. And I think that's difficult for us. But I am going to say this anyway. Sometimes you go to a farmer's market, or you go somewhere that's supposed to be all wholesome and good, and you just want to enjoy it.
Yeah.
You just want to pretend like, well, if it's here, it must be good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And sometimes I think that that's okay.
Yeah.
Too. If it's bright red, you might want to think about it. But
Yes.
sometimes you're there and they're serving like an apanada, and
Yes.
you don't ask any questions.
Just enjoy it.
Just
Someone's
enjoy it.
there making it
They're
in
making
real time.
It's in real time. It's homemade. At least it's that, right? Like, and then maybe if you really do want to ask the questions, maybe you will get the answers you want to hear. But I feel like, it's sometimes like people will ask me about, Trader Joe's, I heard that they say that they're all non-GMO, their labels, but I think they're lying, and I'm like, I can't go down that road.
Yeah.
There's too much already that I have to be concerned with in our country, that I feel like Trader Joe's says that they're, if anything is made by them, that they are non-GMO, I'm going to go with that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Sometimes you have to like have something.
Totally.
That,
Yeah,
because to me, it's not the alternative. It's not just let go and have the McDonald's hamburger. No.
Yeah.
It's like find the grass-fed hamburger and enjoy it, but know that it is grass-fed, grass-finished, and it is a good ingredient product for you to put in your mouth.
Yeah.
But not making it to the point where you're like investigating the investigators.
Totally. And like, that's the thing too, is you find that line, and there will be a line in most things that like, this is all to live your best life, to feel your best, to feel. So if it is consuming and stressed it to the point of like, you do your work and then you use your common sense, you use your gut, you use your intuition. Like you can put together, like for the most part, like once you're, educated and you find kind of your stores and your brands and things to look for in the labels, it won't be anywhere as overwhelming as it might feel when you're starting out on just learning about this.
Right.
If you are completely like blind to just absorbing this, it's going to feel a little overwhelming. You're going to stand in the grocery store and be like, okay, it says organic ingredient, but it doesn't say like organic. Like you're gonna just have to kind of go through that
the older
process.
you get, with that gets harder because you can't see.
I was going to say you can't
see the labels.
The other day I was in Target, totally different, but I was looking at an ingredient for retinol, and I'm like, it was written so small. I'm like, if you're making retinol products, who's going to buy them?
Right.
Not someone that's 20. Like, you got to make them bigger. I'm like looking in and out. Anyways, I laughed. I was like, oh my God, this is like
I now
the
have
stage
a
I'm at in my life.
magnifier on my phone. I'm taking pictures. It takes me like so much longer to go through, like, when I am looking for something new, to find something that I want, because I can't see anything.
You can't
anymore,
see anything. I know.
Which is crazy.
I know. It's funny. So the other thing that I wanted to mention, or made sure that we mentioned in this, because I do think it is a kind of like a point of resistance for a lot of people, is price. Like, why is organic so much more expensive than conventional food or processed food, or however you want to say it? And to me, one of the reasons is and you would think like, organic food doesn't have all these things. It doesn't have, GMOs and artificial and this and that. Like, wouldn't that mean that there's just less? Like, wouldn't it be less expensive to produce this? Because if you're putting all those things inside food, those are things. And unfortunately,
the care and the uptake,
it's the growing and all of that stuff, and like the turnover, the shelf life is smaller. So like you can't make as much food that's going to sit there for so long. So to understand that, to honor the integrity of growing something or raising an animal or going through the process. I mean, if you guys listened to our episode with Keith from Standard Process and really talked about the farming integrity and talking about growing crop and seasons and all of that stuff, that also applies to our food system. And if we're going to honor that, things are going to go a little bit slower. You might produce a little bit less depending on what the weather and the environment's doing that season. And so if that is true, the farmers are going to have to adjust their prices accordingly so that the label that is on the package or how that item is being sold stays true to the standards. And that's just a cost that sometimes needs to be absorbed by the consumer. Yeah. But to understand why that cost might be $2 higher on the organic strawberries than the other ones.
Yeah, and I think that I've had like real success with working with clients talking about your food bill could be the same or even decrease a little bit if you think about the abundance of food that you're buying and how often you need to buy it, right? Like a lot of other countries, speaking of Europe, they go food shopping like to prepare for their meals for the day. Like they don't go to big boxed grocery stores and buy, bulk items that are going to last for if we have like a nuclear war and we have to go in a bomb shelter. Like, and I think if your food's lasting that long, you should be really concerned about what you're having, of course, unless it's like vinegar. Yeah. But I think that it's really important to take note that we do eat too much in America. We, a family of 4 could get away with 2 chicken breasts and an abundance of vegetables. And then that meal's going to be cheaper, right? Yeah. Like if you think about what you're putting on your plate and how much of each thing you're putting on your plate, those more expensive things, you can eat less of those and choose things like the leafy greens and the full of fiber and the full of nutrient dense foods that are going to fill you up and provide you with all of that goodness. That is going to be a cheaper meal if you learn how to shop that way, not so much like buying everything that you see in the grocery store. And then if you're buying like not frozen, like you don't go down those middle aisles and you stick to the outside perimeter of the store, like I think that is one of the best pieces of advice that's been out there for a very long time, right? But shop the perimeter and you're definitely going to spend less. If you're in that frozen food section, you're spending a freaking ton of money.
Totally. Or like, in the even like chips and cereals and all of that stuff add up. And, to your point, like, yes, if you're buying the things and, you're making them, and I think that is also another block for people is buying ingredients. And now what do I do with the ingredients? How do I make the chicken nuggets at home versus buying already breaded in a box that costs $10 for the box? Even when it's organic, like, my family loves like Bell Evans chicken, like the quick things after hockey practice. Right. We buy them at Whole Foods, but like I could make double that amount at home. And so if you're doing, and it's great to have those quick little things here and there, but if you're going to the grocery store every week and buying the frozen pizza versus buying dough sauce and whatever, and being able to make multiple, you're gonna save money, but that also takes you or us making a commitment to carving out some time to prepare, to cook. None of this is possible in any way, shape, or form to reducing consumption and reducing cost if we are buying foods that are already prepared and for the sake of convenience. Yeah. And especially when you add organic to that, you can buy an organic pineapple or cut up organic pineapple, and you can spend $12 at the cut up one or like $4 and cut it up yourself. Like that can be that extreme.
Yeah.
So to understand that it takes that commitment and preparation to do it. I mean, it just is just not going to fall in your lap. But when you do it, like you said, you're going to end up saving money.
And the more you like handle whole foods and get comfortable with that, like you'd be surprised at what can be convenient, right? Like I sometimes, and I still get surprised by it. Like I'll do prep and I'll cut up all my vegetables and have everything in the refrigerator. If I know I'm going to like do roasted potatoes or whatever, I'll cut those up and maybe in the morning or the night before for the next day. And sometimes like I'll just go home and I'll make like cauliflower steaks and I'll roast like red peppers, onions, potatoes, chickpeas, whatever, zucchini. And you pull it out of the oven, you put all this stuff on a plate and it is so good.
So good.
And you're like, that was the most convenient meal I could have had. Like there's no ingredients involved, like a little olive oil and a little sea salt if you want, a little garlic maybe, like, but no prep, like not a lot of prep other than chopping and cleaning. But it's easy. And like, I think that's a tough thing. And maybe we could have an episode about this. Like sometimes we get so caught up in we need a recipe.
Yeah.
Like it has to be full of all these things, right?
Yeah.
Like food could be just as like made from the whole food and you don't even have to chop it up. Like you could put the potatoes in the oven and cook up some beans, throw the beans in the potato and you have a meal.
Yeah.
Like it can be so simple, right? But I think we should get to the bottom line of the organic food, right? So a couple studies I just want to bring up when we're speaking to bottom line, because for me, I think that there's no question that organic food is 100% worth it for yourself and especially for your family, especially our growing children. I am not a big believer in the dirty dozen, and I know that helps people with their excuses and their in moderation and all of that stuff. But we are finding more and more that pesticides and herbicides and fungicides are not just on the skin of things.
Yeah.
They are deep within our foods,
Yeah.
especially if they're grown in the soil. So if you want to get the most benefit out of eating organic and enjoying more nutrients and knowing that your family is getting a higher nutrient dense diet with big benefit and lower risk of disease and chronic illness, and just eating calories that are full, like it's, when we were talking about the restaurants and the places that show these beautiful, healthy things, but they're not serving organic food, to me, like I'm not going to spend $10 on a concentrated cup of pesticides. I want to know, like, I'm getting a green smoothie. I want to know everything in that smoothie is organic. And I think that that's what you should expect for yourself, because $10 for the cup of concentrated pesticides or $10, maybe it's $10.50 for the cup that's all organic. To me, it's worth it. But a few studies that I'll just bring up. Journal of Nutrition concluded that organic produce definitely has higher levels of certain nutrients, especially antioxidants, than conventionally grown foods. And that was the one, 18 to 69%. So that's a big number.
Yeah.
Another one that I think is really compelling is the Pediatrics Journal. They studied children exposed to organic foods and found that children who ate organic foods had lower levels of pesticide residues in their urine compared to those who eat conventional foods. And as soon as you switch over to that organic diet with your children, that the residue of that pesticide and those chemicals come down in the urine. So you know that there's obviously still a reason why we should make these changes. And then there are some studies about while the organic foods could be more expensive, that if you look at your financial or your budgeting over time, that you end up spending less money if you're a family that buys organic than if you are a family that buys conventional, because you have less illness, you have less chronic disease, you tend to learn about more healthier foods and eat less processed food. So it ends up working out for you in the long run.
It's kind of like a lifestyle. And also like, honestly, it tastes better. Like
Absolutely.
I can taste the difference when I'm having an organic strawberry versus a conventional or an apple, or I can taste the waxes and the things that are sprayed on them or the freshness in the opposite. And so when you are spending the money, you know you're not only doing something better, but you are enjoying and tasting, and it's richer and it kicks on your taste buds a little bit more, and all of those things that just come going back to like the roots of things, you know?
And sustainability.
Yeah.
The last study I was looking at was by Rodal Institute, which we had Maria on our podcast a couple months ago. Is it months now? But their study indicated that organic farming can build healthy soil, which can sequester carbon and mitigate climate change, which making organic farming a more sustainable option for future generations. So if you think about that, I feel like, add that to your list of your bottom line of why you're choosing organic. I know so many people that they recycle or, they are really concerned with composting, but they don't eat organic. And I'm like, you are contradicting everything that you believe in.
Yeah.
Like it is the number one priority for sustainability.
Yeah. It's funny how we like separate what we put into our bodies for food.
Yeah.
So much from so many other things, good things that we do. We've talked about this and we won't go into it, but it's a psychological, it just shows the power that the industry has over people to not prioritize what we're putting into our body.
Yeah. So guys, more nutrients, better environment, healthier lifestyle. Like and you can do this.
Yes. And the bottom line is choose organic as often as you can and choose it with a why. Why am I doing this? Because it's going to benefit you. It's going to benefit your family. So hopefully this was helpful the next time you go to the grocery store or the farmer's market to, again, be your own advocate, be your own kind of personal researcher, ask the questions, empower yourself, teach it to your family and to your kids. And as always, reach out, ask questions, keep letting us know what you want to hear in these bottom lines. We love doing them, and we love your feedback. So thanks for
everyone.
listening. Bye.